Hey folks, so this is the course overview where I'm going to do all the things that professors do on the first day of class when they hand you the syllabus, right? So this is senior seminar. It is a writing intensive course. I am interpreting that a bit differently. The 15-page research paper that tends to be a requirement for a class like this at the end of the semester is not something that we're doing. And the reason why I'm not doing that is because I don't necessarily think that that's the only way that we can do a writing intensive course. And so what I'm going to do instead is I've broken this course up into 7 different units. And at the end of each unit, you are going to submit a 1-page single-spaced, in other words, 700 words or more, like 1-pager that's polished and that is a lovely piece of writing at the end of each unit. And the other thing that's really important too is that instead of prioritizing the research paper, some people can do research papers, right? You can like totally in your 1-pager, right? Use a secondary source and like analyze a particular aspect of the whatever the series is that we're doing. Totally go ahead and do that if that's your jam. But the thing is that I think that focus on the research paper also ends up sidelining a lot of other disciplines that are in English studies. And so I want to hold space for folks that might be into other aspects of English studies. And so that is why what I'm going to have y'all do instead is to have that 1-pager be, I want you to basically choose the genre that you want to choose, whether that is a piece of, analytic writing, a piece of expository writing, a creative nonfiction piece. It can be a piece of creative writing. It can be a piece of digital writing. It can be a series of poems, right? Whatever the case is, right? It just has to be related to or inspired by, and there should be some sort of clear connection, but related to or inspired by whatever the series is that we just watched. Now you're thinking, series, what? Well, you probably already know this, but instead of having y'all read a bunch of books are fun. I love books. My whole office is filled with books. The point here is instead what I want us to do, because I think it's going to be far more like community building and also just like joyful, is that we are going to have the theme of kids in the apocalypse. I know you're thinking, what? Joyful? But as it turns out, there are a lot of shows, like animated kid shows as of late, that seem to be super into like putting their show within the backdrop of an apocalypse. I'm not kidding. So those kinds of shows are things like Centaur World, Steven Universe. There's actually 2 apocalypses in there, right? There's the apocalypse there are 2 apocalypses. No spoilers. Kipo and the Age of Wonder Beasts, Adventure Time, Over the Garden Wall. I'm being loose with Over the Garden Wall. I just think it's cool as hell, and I think that we could absolutely talk about it as an apocalyptic. Adventure Time is obviously apocalyptic. She-Ra and the Princess of Power and the Owl House, right? So they all have this kind of like pre or post or like during the apocalypse sort of situation, right? And so I think that one, it's really fascinating that that is something that people are choosing to like write stories around. But the other thing that I think is really fascinating is in spite of that apocalyptic context, all of those series actually end up featuring like weirdness over order and tenderness over violence, diversity over conformity, community over subjection, right? And hope, right? And agency over despair. And so I think that obviously these animated series are making a kind of argument about world building, right? And so one of the other reasons why I was like, hey, why don't we do this? Not just because they're neat shows, but also because they inspire a lot of questions, which then in turn can kind of give you a lot of different opportunities to find avenues to write, right? You don't have to write specifically about the series. Some people will, but you can also write something that is inspired by the series, right? So these are just some questions to sort of think about, but like, you know, for instance, like why kids in the apocalypse, or like how many worlds are there, right? Has the world ended before? For whom did it end? You know, what does it mean for the world to end? And you'll see these kind of hyperlinked sources in here. That's basically me saying, hey, people have talked about this in scholarship, and I just want to like cite this so you're not thinking I'm just like making up like a random BS class, right? Like, you know, this is something folks talk about, and I just kind of like want to sort of hold space for that. But, you know, there are a lot of questions, you know, like how are we representing different like groups, especially marginalized groups, right? And who gets to characterize them? Who's in the writing room? What makes for a good story, right? How might fans influence a series, right? How might fans, through their own writing, create like a whole bunch of like subcultures, and why is that work important? Or even just like, what's the emotional, in what sort of way emotionally, intellectually, or even creatively does the premise of this particular show inspire me, right? Or what the fuck did we just watch, right? So there are a lot of questions that can be avenues or jumping off points for responding to these series. So I want you to kind of like tap into your whimsy and weirdness, and I am intentionally trying to create a class that is reminding you about what is joyful about English studies and about being English majors, because my God, you're seniors, right? And I want this to be joyful. I mean, we're taking this course in the middle of a panini, right? So just sort of keep that in mind. Other stuff, required course texts. Y'all are going to need to, instead of books, we're going to need to get y'all access to these different animated series that we're watching. I list them here: Centaur World, Steven Universe, Kipo. I did that already. The point here is that some of you might already have like access to streaming services. So the streaming services where you can access these, the easiest ones are Netflix, Hulu, and Disney Plus. Now, before you freak out and be like, oh, GPAT's asking me to do a subscription, I will actually happily share my login information for Netflix, Hulu, and Disney, and I've purposely bought those plans so that I can share them with you. I say that because I'm sharing mine. I've been sharing with my sibling, but I subscribe to these so that you don't need to buy anything. So if you don't have access to one of these services, or you're not sharing them with a friend already, because I know a lot of people do that, right? You can totally log into mine. Now, the one thing I want you to keep in mind though, is that like, if you are logging into mine, totally fine. That's why I signed up for them. You know, you might want to sort of like stagger when you're watching it. I imagine not everyone has like a synchronized schedule, but the idea is that, you know, like some streaming services have like shitty rules about you can't watch the same episode at the same time that someone else in the same account is watching it, or whatever, right? So just sort of like keep that in mind if you are using that. But I can't imagine that everyone will be like sitting down at the exact same time. All right, so there's that. The next piece. You'll obviously need access to Kent State's like G Suite, so Gmail, Google Docs, Google Drive, and then obviously you'll need a Slack account. Slack is free, and if you have watched my other videos, you already know what Slack is. But here's the invite to our Slack workspace. Again, if you have not seen our workspace, this is our adorable little workspace, and it's going to be super fun in terms of that kind of thing. All right, so in terms of like the assignment overview, there is no huge final project in this class, because remember, what I'm doing for Writing Intensive is like, it's the frequency with which you're writing, and then your ability to pivot in terms of like responding to certain things, and also practicing out genres that you love. The only requirement that I have is that you hold yourself to the standards of writing of the kind of traditional genres within English studies. Right? So if it's a piece of creative writing, y'all are seniors. You know what's what, right? You know the kind of standards. So just like take it seriously and just do something, right? So there are 4 different assignments that are like mini assignments that happen every unit. And they're really straightforward. Most of them are about participating, and then the last one is like your end of the unit 1-pagers, right? And those 1-pagers are 700 words or more. That is like a single space page of writing. The reason why I say 700 words or more is because some folks, based on like what font they're choosing or their document setup, might have less than that. So like 700 words is like the minimum. You can totally go over that. I'm not one of those a-holes that's like, oh, you went over, I'm not going to read this. That's mean. Why would you do that, right? So there's that. Yeah. And then how are you going to earn a grade? Now this is also different, and I'm going to be completely unapologetic about it. I actually do not think that I'm going to read your stuff. I'm going to respond to it. So are your peers. But I do not think that it actually helps you as writers for me to look at your piece of writing and then place some sort of ranking on it and put a letter on it. That's going to like crush your spirit, right? Because you could be like super into something, and then I could be like, you know what I mean? Why? So what we're going to do instead is a little bit different. But I think that it's going to ease a lot of stress and then allow you to be creative. So instead of me assigning letter grades to certain assignments and like counting things and being an accountant, you know, of what you've done, I'm going to obviously pay attention because I'm your instructor, right? Your professor, whatever, you know. So this is how we're going to do it. We are meeting 28 times during this semester, right? Every day I'm going to ask you to do two things: to have done the homework and to be actively engaged in class, right? So you bring your whole self to class, all right? Every day that you do that, you get a point, right? That's it. So that's like if a piece of homework is done and you've done it and it's like super great, you get a point, right? So it's basically like if you do the stuff that you're supposed to do, cool, you get a point, right? If you like phone it in, right? Maybe it's on the sliding scale. Now, keep this in mind, all right? I know we're in the middle of a pandemic, so I've got a sliding scale. So if you actually bring your whole self to class 24 times or more, meaning that 24 actually is going to count as 100%. So anything over 24, you're good. It counts as 100%, right? So there's like a sliding scale, and I'm doing that to kind of factor in the chaos that is the pandemic. Now, what that means is obviously like for unexcused absences, but I just want to say this, and this says this in the syllabus. If you are feeling unwell, whether we're talking about an illness or you are not feeling well emotionally or psychologically, let me know. Like, you don't have to like tell me your life story. Just be like, Dr. G, like, I'm not feeling well. That I'm not going to penalize you for being sick, right? Or feeling unwell in some kind of way. All right. And you don't have to like document anything to me because it's like fucking ableist in classes. Why would I do that? So just keep that in mind. And if you are experiencing some sort of like long-term sort of illness, that is also totally fine. We will work something out. You know, so just don't panic. All right. If you find yourself in that situation. So there's that. In terms of how to contact me, there are all sorts of ways. You can use Slack in class and out of class, right? You can use that Ask GPAT channel. You can also direct message me in Slack. It's way easier than email. And then also if it's like something urgent, you can also text me. My number is right here, okay? So there's and right here, right? And then I have office hours on Zoom from 9:30 in the morning until 11:45, right? Which is right when our class starts. So if you want to jump in and have an meeting with me, that's there for you. I will ask though, and I say this in here, please let me know ahead of time. Give me a heads up, because sometimes I might have like students who are in my office hours, like when it's like in person, you can already tell that there's a student in someone's office. It's a little bit different here. So give me a heads up about that. I do want to say in terms of office hours that this is your senior seminar. And so if any of y'all have questions about Future You, like in terms of what you want to do post-graduation, I want to encourage each one of you. I'm not going to require it because I think that's shitty, but like I want to heavily encourage y'all to just meet with me once during my office hours, or, and so we can talk about your plans, right? Because if you tell me, hey, GPAT, this is what I think I want to do, I can give you some solid advice, because like I have ideas about like, okay, this is a piece of volunteer work that you might want to do, or this is an internship that you might want to consider. And the more I know that those are things that y'all are interested in, like let's say that a lot of you are like, hey, this is a career that I'm interested in, and my recommendation is for you to do some like interning or volunteering with a particular organization. And I find out that that's like a thing, I could potentially, contact, my dean and then ask that I be able to do some sort of like large class internship in the spring semester where you get credit for doing that, right? and you're all doing your own thing. So I guess my point is, like, do let me know, or even if it's like graduate work or whatever, like we can talk about those things. Whatever it is that you want to do, I just want to make sure that you don't feel like I'm just like, throwing you into the deep end, post graduation. Like, I will absolutely give you like my honest assessment of what I think is like viable, and then also like set you up with opportunities, because I feel like that is what we should do, right? So that is it, friends. This is my course overview, and I appreciate you sticking through it, and I will catch you in the Google Doc and on Slack. All right, let's have a good semester.